nothing is straightforward when you're making a video game.
As a disclaimer, Helio Stratos will be a single-player narrative experience. I mean, okay, so I've actually been dreading making part 2 of devlog 1. Pretty silly to do it this way anyway. There, I should have just made them 2 separate devlogs, but we're committing to the bit. Ever since way back when I played the Homeworld series of games, like the original Homeworld, I think the idea of simple geometry in an open 3D space really struck me as something that, not to kind of poop on Relic, that's something that anyone could do.
No one's left. Everything's gone. Carrick is burning.
Or that, as an entry point, it would be fairly easy to do. And for some degrees of what I've been working on, it absolutely and certainly has. Most specifically, making the models. Very simple to make geometric models that, and very easy to code sort of with aircraft, the visual aspects of flaps and that sort of thing. I thought the U-wing was really cool, and I believe I said this in my last video. And I wanted to make an aircraft that kind of extolled the virtues of the U-wing. I had to move away from it being a troop transport just for how it worked in my universe, and the fact that I was mixing it with a true fighter craft, and I wanted it to have forward-facing guns, and mixing it with the F-14, this swing wing concept, because the U-wing in the Star Wars universe also has the swing wing concept. So I began prototyping, and I'll throw them up on the screen as I'm talking, but I began prototyping this model because I wanted to have something to motivate me, and at the time I was actually more interested in learning Blender than learning Unreal, and over time, as I've gotten better at Unreal, I've fallen more in love with it and started really engaging with the game. But early on, I'd say my dev time was 80% Blender, 20% Unreal Engine. And just, it's interesting how my skills have evolved in both capacities, because I'm a complete novice. I'm not coming from any kind of background. I'm not going to sell you a lie that I'm any kind of expert or have worked in any of these industries. I've been a graphic designer for, probably going on 14 years now. But total hobbyist graphic designer. I took a class in high school, and the teacher took me under her wing, and by God, I was so bad back then. But I enjoyed working with Photoshop, and I started using it in my free time to make little YouTube projects or make little graphic projects. There was a short stint in college where I was a graphic designer for a website that was a fan website for this game called Spiral Knights, and I really kind of cut my gums on hey, I'm gonna be a professional in this and bring some things to life, and I really pushed myself with Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. But I'll talk about more about my past later on in the video, because the graphic design part is a part of what brought me to making the game originally. But I'm just trying to give you an overview right now of where I started with the game, and to where I've gotten through all the different technical hurdles and things I've learned. Getting that first flight test done, I followed this really great tutorial. I'll throw it on screen. It'll be in the doobly-doo. And just starting out, first night, spent an hour, only watched the first part of this tutorial just to get the motion going forward. And all of it is an add actor offset. It's taking some float variables, throwing them on event tick, updating them from the keybind input W, right? So the first iteration of the Shift Gecko, which the Shift Gecko is the first aircraft in the game. Most of the stuff I've shown you has actually been the Strike Wyvern, which has more become the mascot of the game. But initially, the Shift Gecko was the first one that was in the game. And its first model was a totally different beast. And I throw that model up. I get everything attached to it, which was hell, by the way. One of the hardest learning experiences is not knowing anything about Unreal Engine, touching Unreal Engine, and not knowing anything about how anything works. So I'm talking to my cohort. They're helping me attach different things and get my first actor up and running. I get the actor in there, and it's flying forward, and it can slow down, and it's moving in one direction. And I am ecstatic. It's like it's electricity going through my fingers. Like, the thing works how it should work. And over time, I start going through the tutorial more and more, and I start getting the aircraft to rotate and fly around. And it's completely unrealistic, but I mean, I have the seed of what is now my flight model, which I've spent a lot of time tweaking and getting everything right to where the aircraft feels like it's a aircraft under the effects of gravity. But starting out from nothing with Unreal Engine, just a total chore. I found out a way, and it was some obscure knowledge on how to get flaps to, or how to get sockets created so I could make them exacting. Because you can make them exacting in Unreal Engine, but it's a little bit of a slow process. I think the workflow works better if you get your sockets going on Blender as much as possible. But you just have to name it a specific thing. And so when that gets passed to Unreal Engine, now Unreal Engine knows, oh, hey, this is a socket, right? Like, super simple, but very difficult information to find, to just fully reset. So I inevitably got to the point where I was making a second shift Gecko. I was building two ships at once, and the first one had all these weird issues, and the second one wasn't experiencing these weird issues, and it took me forever to find out that whenever I was just fixing the local transform was being applied whenever I fixed it. So it was giving all of my flaps these weird offsets, and they were just kind of like floating in the air as I was trying to maneuver the aircraft. And I'm like, this is totally wrong. And I literally racked my brain for maybe 2 weeks up against this problem. And I'm not even going to get into talking about how I got my AI working. But there was this error where the AI was turning on a dime, and it turned out that an add actor rotation was happening twice, because I was doing an additional add actor rotation in my drift that didn't need to exist. Like, I had just erroneously added some code that did not need to be there, and it was making it, weirdly enough, second order effects, it was making it seem like my AI was like bad, right? So as soon as I removed that, the AI were acting correctly. And I found all this just trying to troubleshoot, trying to debug. One of my other background things is information technology, so we learn how to troubleshoot, which troubleshooting is one of the most valuable skills you'll ever learn as a person. Programming can be really all over the place, and you have to do a lot of studying. It's like writing. If you're writing a novel, revisions is where you're going to really make your money. It sucks to do revisions. It sucks to refactor code. It sucks to troubleshoot and try to bug hunt and error find, but you make so much money when you do it on a regular basis, so it should be kind of in your game. Another really weird hurdle that I came up against was how am I going to create drive plume? That's what I call it. There's not a really great term for it, but the part of the jet engine that opens and closes like a flower, really. So I had it so that the petals on the plume would close, and whenever it was going faster, which is not how it actually works. They're supposed to open up when it's going fast. To get it working, I was doing this whole thing in Blender where you can parent everything to an object with a specific bone modifier, and it worked perfectly. But then come to find out that if the dance of Blender to Unreal Engine, it does not convert. Unreal Engine will not convert modifiers. Everything has to be applied before it goes into Unreal Engine. So I was in this big conundrum, and I found this 5-year-old Blender post, shout out to the Blender stack, about shape keys. And now that I'm utilizing shape keys, I use them in a lot of places. Shape keys have solved a lot of my problems. Specifically, this was before I started doing the gun stuff, right? So I solved a lot of problems with my guns using shape keys as well. And there's a really simple node to fuck with shape keys in Unreal Engine, and you can plug that bad boy into into your current speed value, right? Give it a in range, right, like a map range. So it normalizes like your top speed from 0 to 100, and then you get like a very like solid and slow opening and closing of those plumes as the aircraft is moving quickly. It's like there's these small graphical things, but I really lean into them because since the game is just simple geometry, there's not a lot of visual interest. So I try to add that wherever I can, and sort of in the vein of realism. When I originally started making Helio Stratos, I expected that the game was going to be a lot more low poly. I expected this to be a thing because at the time I thought it was easier. And to some degrees, it is easier to make a model that's low poly, and I'll be showing you on the screen some of the models that I made that were low poly. And I'm so glad that I made the decision to try to make something a little bit more of a high res. Especially very recently, I found out about the auto smooth feature, and that really changed my life. For a long time, I was having issues with the lighting on the aircraft and some things, and everything looked too polygonal, even though I was trying to increase the poly count. And while that helps, you still need to apply a actual smooth, and I was using the wrong methods in Blender at the time to achieve those smoothing elements. And then I had this interesting interaction in my cohort, my game dev cohort, with some folks. I was showing them the first gun model that I had made, because at the time that is when I had decided that I was going to add visual interest to the game through the use of guns and kind of an aim down sights feature. I was playing a lot of Fortnite at the time and really appreciating the different animations that I was seeing within Fortnite. The argument was that it was way too detailed, and I have since looked back to my references and realized, yes, they were absolutely correct with that. But I liked it so much. I liked the Sparky so much that I wanted to keep this Gatling gun that I had made. And so my trade-off was like, all right, I will just upscale the rest of the models. And at the time, initially, I was very scared to do that. But just kind of looked into how to do some of that stuff on Blender, make it high poly, and learned it really wasn't as scary as I was making it out to be, especially since they're static meshes, right? Like they weren't dynamic like a lot of the like humanoid actors and things of that nature. So they don't like transform weird, I guess is what I'm getting at. So it's easier to make these things more high resolution. It just works. It just works easier, I guess. And so I just decided that every single airplane in the game, and I only had 2 made at that point, was going to be at a higher resolution to match the guns. And I was going to continue to make all the remaining 9 guns in that same higher resolution. So sometimes being stubborn provides an opportunity, and I think it did wonders for my game. I think my things look a lot more appealing, and it doesn't look samey as a low poly game. So I don't know. Personally, I'm appreciative of that. I guess I can throw my Hostile Waters reference book away, but I went on this insane like 1 month, a month and a half tear where I was just modeling these guns and then learning how to animate them on the fly. Like I'd never done animation in Blender before, and I'd been using Blender for about a year at that point. And I went in and I just spent like a lot of time learning these things. It totally drove some burnout. I was burnt out for maybe like a week, 2 weeks afterwards. I make the game in my spare time after work. Okay, so let's talk about why I'm making a video game. I wanted to make games from a very young age. Me and my friends, as many others I'm sure, daydreamed of the perfect games. In the 5th grade, I did a school project and came to the realization that there were no jobs for games where I was living. Undeterred, in high school, I created my LIFE, which is my Limitless Idea Field Entry. It's a little book with all my ideas written on its pages. Lofty ideas, I'll admit, for games I had no idea how to make. I made maps in Halo 3's Forge mode for my friends when I was in high school, and I kind of became the resident designer of the group. All this to say, I had a passion to create without much latitude to execute. Once I got to college, my dreams had a quiet death. I realized I couldn't hack it in computer science, which was my major at the time. Chalk it up to my immaturity or my inability to see the forest for the trees. I started trying to design games of pen and paper, war games, role-playing games.
Heaven's Grasp. NASA develops a warp gate in the hopes to bring humanity the space age. 2094. What came through was the calamity. They destroyed us, ate our minds, left us as husks. SEAL Team 6 destroyed the gate. 2096. Humanity fights back. In Egypt, men with papyrus scrolls managed to fight and subdue calamity. France. Elsewhere, smaller horrors take root. Opportunist monsters from the other side of Heaven's grasp that seek to steal your knowledge and life along with it. 2101.
I swung with a group who had a passion for D&D, and I followed it. While in college, I did level up my personal skills and got more latitude. I rounded out in ways I hadn't expected. It laid the foundation for my endeavors now, and at the time, I had given up. I bounced off computer science, studied IT, and have been working in IT for some 8 years now. Except the last 5 years, I've been doing it as an officer in the Marine Corps. I'm from a family of Marines who principally worked in the Air Wing. Things just worked out in a way that I got to work in the Air Wing as well. Having to work with airframes at work casts in sharp relief my love for aviation. I took to it like a duck to water. Remember how I had said I'd given up and worked on tabletop? Well, that rounded me out too. And eventually I wanted to try my hand at making miniatures, so I got started on learning Blender. One other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is going to be out of sequence, is getting the drift mechanic working. The drift mechanic is probably the thing I've spent the most time on. I got it working immediately, and I got it working like through epiphany. I just thought about how some of the other systems worked, and I was like, okay, maybe this will do what I want it to. And it did, right away. I was like, holy shit. I'm not going to go into the drift camera. It's fucking cursed, but it works. It does what I want it to, so whatever, we're leaving it. I hope you stick around for the next devlog where I start telling you more of the lore for Helio Stratos. I'm really excited for that one.